Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Silent Night from 2021. Now, this is yet another reminder of why I have to specify the year the movies come out, because Silent Night is a very generic name, and one that has been repeatedly reused in cinema for very, very different kinds of movies, but often oriented around the holiday season. So I watched this. I can't actually remember why I initially looked into this movie, whether it was suggested by somebody or something, but I picked it up around when it was, or I put it on my list around when it came out, and then I never watched it. And in part it's because just looking at the sort of setup for it, it looks like a horror movie, kind of. And it is and it isn't. I would say that this falls into sort of the black comedy area. Something that is particularly British and dry, but ultimately comedic. And yet at the same time, it has things to say and says them with a subtlety and an intelligence that I appreciate. The movie itself is not super complicated plot-wise. Most of the movie is really oriented towards exploring a whole bunch of characters in a house together, and their relationships with each other, and their relationships with the world they live in. And obviously, like, if you're more the I want a feel-good movie for the holidays type of person, then this is probably not the movie for you, but at least not during the holidays. But if you're on board for a let's look at a grim reality of family and friends being put together after years and years of, emotional dynamics being explored or unexplored, then I think this is a really interesting film. And it's not what I expected really at all. I was anticipating this being something a little bit closer to, Ready or Not? That was the name of it, I think. And the movie, I want to compare it to another movie, but the comparison would be very unfavorable for the other movie. I will bring it up later, but I'm not gonna say what it is right now. But it's something else I had watched. What's interesting here is that this movie is exploring a whole bunch of friends from many years ago getting together for an annual dinner that it seems like they've done before, and exploring the relationship dynamics between them, both in a historical sense and in the context of their most recent meeting, which is fraught with a variety of unapproachable, they're not dealing with their problems very well. And I think that can be a very relatable thing to people, especially around the holidays, whether it's more often with family, but sometimes also with friends too, trying to figure out how to navigate the unspoken awkwardness that can exist between people. This is really furthered in some interesting ways by the introduction of a whole bunch of child characters who, again, I'm going to say it like I usually do, I am usually not a fan, but the child actors in this film are all really very good, especially our sort of, there's main one and then a couple that are more off to the side, and the main child actor is very, very good. The others are good as well, but have less time to show what they can do, and so the dynamics of there's all these adults, and some of them have kids, and some of them have partners, and some of them are in different financial and economic and emotional situations, and so on and so forth, adds a lot of dynamics, even without necessarily learning a lot about any particular character. this is sort of an ensemble piece. There's no singular focus, although there are definitely characters who get more of the agency, I would say. But that's not to say that the other characters aren't fully fleshed out in their own ways. I towards the end of this, I'll flag it when I'm going to do it, but I need to talk more about the plot of the film in general, and then I need to talk about one particular thing. And the plot in general is probably not going to be particularly spoilery, because I think the dynamics between the characters in the shots and scenes is the interesting part, and that I can't really spoil. But there is a thing right at the end which I'll talk about and signpost that before I talk about it. Production wise, this looks perfectly good. It's not like extraordinary in any particular way, but it's visually appealing, if a little bit gloomy at times. I think there are some effects that don't work super well, and I almost wish they had omitted them entirely and just you told instead of shown, which is an unusual thing for me to say, but in this case, I think it's the thing that they're showing is a little bit too silly to see, that it sort of undermines their point. I think the character dynamics work really well, in no small part because both the dialogue is very well written and knows when it needs to be there and when it needs to be quiet, but also because the acting between the actors, the like physical dynamics, speak very well to the sort of emotional closeness or emotional distance between characters, and they play very well to all of the actors play very well to the emotional states and their capacity for handling the things that are going on. So credit on all fronts to that. I also think that there's some not entirely subtle, but pretty good storytelling that goes on with the sets and the costumes. And you can understand a lot about who characters are and what's important to them based on how they present themselves and how they enter and work in the spaces that they are in. And I think overall it balances really well a tone of sort of dark comedy with an honest reality and an earnest attempt to interrogate the issues in relationship dynamics and their evolutions over time, as well as some social issues that are a little bit bigger. If you want absolutely no possibility of spoilers, I'm going to say you might want to sign off at this point. I'll say that I think the movie is quite good, and while not a particularly Christmassy movie, it is set at the time, but I think it's a pretty darn good film in general, and I would recommend seeing it. That said, what I'm about to talk about next, I don't think is particularly spoilery, because talking about the plot itself is very simple and there's not that much going on, and it's pretty easy to read in the first place. But your call. So the whole framing for the film is that all of these characters are basically having their last meal, because there's an impending apocalypse that will kill them all, because of the negligence of what is essentially pointed at climate change and sort of poisoning the earth. And this is one of the things that kind of doesn't work that well, unfortunately. It's a little bit too literal, and it's a little bit too silly because it's literally a wall, like a storm of poison gas that rolls over the world and kills everybody in its path. And it starts to feel a little bit like that. What's the movie with the trees? The trees are killing people. With Marky Mark, and made by the guy who makes bad movies. If you know, you know. I can't remember the name of that film. I've blocked it out of my head. It's goofy, and it's a little bit, the rest of the movie is a little bit too grounded in reality for this sort of silly apocalypse to feel like it has the same appropriate weight. This is not helped by the fact that the CGI, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, the CGI is very goofy, and the choices of a glowing green tornado that pushes poison gas and kills people is very silly. And it doesn't completely upend the tone, but I kind of think they could have gotten away with not doing it. They could have just said, oh, there's just poison spreading, if they have to explain it at all. And there are some plot points that sort of hinge on that, but it's almost, because part of what hinges on that is the unexpectedness of some of the things, that really only points me more towards, then just don't show it. Let it be a thing that is not understood. There's this adds so I have to compare this to a movie we watched before, Don't Look Up, because Don't Look Up is a bad movie that is very over the top and cheesy and very preachy. This movie is not about that. And while it is very unsubtle in pointing out that this is supposed to be a clear analogy for climate change and the problems of continuing to neglect the real ramifications of actions and greed and stuff like that, it's the whole point in this movie of bringing that up is using it as a framing device to juxtapose against the individual actions of characters. Most of the characters in this film are, for one reason or another, kind of unlikable, and that's on purpose. You're not really supposed to like most of the characters. They're kind of not good people. They're kind of posh jerks, most of them. And especially when one of the kids is essentially acting for some amount of time as the voice of reason, or at least the voice of frustration, and trying to hold their parents' generation to account. That is much more satisfying in terms of saying, these are the real ramifications of a different generation's negligence. And that generation is literally here standing in the room, denying that they caused any problems, and continuing to actively in the room do the things that show how much they don't care and how they can be selfish and not think about the ramifications of their actions. I do have one qualm with this, which is that it gets a little bit hinky in two parts. And actually, maybe this is the point where I should break off and say I'm going to spoil two specific beats in the film that are related to actual sort of surprising elements in the film. I still don't think it'll completely ruin the movie by any means, but it's there's your warning. So let me talk about the child character. I think his name is Art. The main child actor expresses very direct frustration with his parents and all of the other adults present, or almost all the adults present, and also skepticism, because he has, secretly been finding out the things that like the adults were trying to hide about the reality of the situation. And he's very compelling in that way until he lands on a point of rejecting the I got to be careful for YouTube, the unaliving pill that the government has provided. It's supposed to be the like painless way out rather than being, horribly killed by this poison gas. And this is problematic in two ways. One is that there's one other character who expresses skepticism as well, but she has some personal reasons for it that make more sense. The kid kind of comes off more as a do your own research. It starts to come off as a do your own research, don't believe the government kind of person. And I think that's dangerous. I don't know that that's necessarily what was intended by the screenwriters, but that's how he starts to come off as he raises questions that should be essentially resolved. Narratively speaking, it doesn't make any sense for them not to have like firmly established, no, this is what has actually happened. This is, we're at the point of no return. It's over, and you can choose to pass peacefully or violently. And it's not wrong to be skeptical, but especially when one of the characters he interfaces with is a doctor who is supposed to be, narratively up to a point, seems to be supposed to be the voice of reason, to say, no, like we actually know these things, so on and so forth. He's like the representative of science, but is written in a way that does not fully reassure anyone, and leads that skepticism to its end point. Now, if you're still around, here's a spoiler for the very, very last scene in the film, which unfortunately I think is the worst possible I shouldn't say that. It's a very, very bad choice on behalf of the movie, and I think the shot should be completely stricken from the movie because it ruins so much else about this film. The final shot of the film is Art, who went outside, got hit by one of the poison tornadoes, and died, waking up after everyone else in the house has died. He wakes up, and earlier in the film, he says something about, how do we know nobody can survive? It's just what the government told us. And they never explain how the mechanics of the stupid apocalypse actually work. So it doesn't make a lot. They never explain how it works. But with our doctor character, who has theoretically gone through the literature on his own, and there should be some sort of, you'd think, scientific analysis of these gases that the Earth is supposedly putting out, to say, oh no, this is like caustic gas. It's not like magic gas. It's, who knows? Let's pretend it's volcanic gases or something. It's like, no, here's the chemical makeup of this gas. It doesn't just like, it causes brain hemorrhaging and nerve nerve melting and all this other stuff. Like, those aren't suggestions. That's not how science is. That's not how physics and chemistry are. That's pretty firm in in most regards. And if they had, it could have gone the other way. They could have said, we have no idea how it works, but it seems to be killing everyone, so that's where we're going. And then the skepticism is warranted. But because they make it out pretty firmly to be, this is just a natural effect, it's grounded in science, and it looks for all accounts to be the apocalypse. The idea that at the end, the little kid with his skepticism of the government would be right and survive, and him and everybody else who didn't believe the government's lies about the dying pill, they are the ones who survive. It really undermines. Okay, so it sets a bad precedent, I think, especially in the current social and political climate of like denialism of facts and science. That is problematic. As far as approaching the other social dynamics in the movie, I think that has some good and some bad, but it definitely dramatically changes the interpretation of the rest of the film. If you know going in, rewatching this, or having now listened to me and then deciding to go watch it anyway, if you know that it won't actually, like, that they either die and come back, like, he doesn't get up, he just like opens his eyes. So it's very ambiguous. It's stupid. It's just stupid. If you know that's how it works, then like, it doesn't change the dynamics between the characters. The characters are supposed to be these flawed, kind of shitty people who don't know how to act around each other and make terrible decisions for themselves and each other, and cause untold suffering to themselves, each other, their kids, and probably a whole bunch of other people they know, because they're crappy people. But it does change the idea of who these characters are. It changes the character of the doctor, who apparently didn't do his research. It changes the character of all of these other people who have their own knowledges, experiences, careers, so on and so forth. And just like, it doesn't change who they are fundamentally, but it raises questions about like, what responsibility did they have, especially if they're like so worried about their kids and that sort of thing. Like, it raises more questions about, hey, do these people actually care about their kids, or do they just have kids to have kids? Which is already a question in the film and doesn't need to be changed. That thought doesn't need to be changed by this other element. I genuinely don't know whether the intention here was to encourage bizarre skepticism that I think is a really bad idea, or if it was just a badly formed way of setting up a sequel in the post-apocalypse or something like that. I think this works really well as a self-contained entity, and for everybody at the end to just be dead is the perfect conclusion. And I think that is the conclusion that works best tonally as well. But for some reason they made this decision, and I just strongly disagree with it. Anyway, if you watched this film before I put this video up, or midway through the video you went and watched it, or if you're gonna go watch it and come back, please let me know your thoughts. I'm really curious people's takes on this, because I think it's a pretty strong film overall, and then it's just got like one or two things that kind of hurt. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been your host, the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.